Hey guys, this is Sean from SGT Report, and I just wanted to take a brief minute to offer this caveat before you listen to this interview with Karen Hudes. As everybody knows, I took the interview down 10 minutes after posting it on Sunday night, and the reason for that was in the moments, literally within 5 minutes, 10 minutes of posting the thing, I had seen nearly 20 thumbs down and a dozen or more super negative comments from a variety of people about Karen. And it gave me pause. It made me wonder, what had I missed? Some of the charges were that posting anything from Karen makes us disinfo agents. And of course, that gives us cause for concern because the last thing that we'd ever want to do is pass on disinformation. So I thought, take the video down, do my research about Karen. Maybe there's some breaking news or some breaking admissions from her that people knew about that I didn't. So I took it down just to give myself some time to reassess. It was midnight, I was tired, and upon getting up today, I saw so many wonderful comments from people at SGT Report, such balanced comments from people who just really care about truth and want to hear from a variety of people, that it seemed to make a lot of sense to repost the interview in its entirety and let the chips fall where they may. I think that Karen and I had a pretty dynamic conversation, and I hope that you're able to get something from it. It's our primary concern that we share quality information from really great people, and that was our intention with this interview with Karen Hudes, who worked at the World Bank for nearly 20 years, and she tells me in this interview that she is now back at the World Bank as General Counsel, which was news to me, and I hope you're able to take something from this interview. Rory's on the line just to talk through this a little bit. Rory, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
So did I make the right call pulling that down? It was unprecedented. I didn't want to do it, but I just thought, boy, at midnight, I just don't have time to think about this. If I did something wrong, I'm going to take this thing down and reassess with the intention of posting it later and letting people know, why I took it down. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it was the right call at the time. I mean, like you said, it was midnight. You're tired. You're getting bombarded by people that are making all these assertions that may or may not be true. But according to, I mean, I've paid a lot of attention to the comments at SGT Report today, and there's a lot of really good comments, and not too many that are negative. Not, there's some that are kind of from the fringe, as I would say, and then but most of them are right down the line.
Yeah, most of them I found to be just really the trusted, great people that are regulars who we very much appreciate. And if there weren't
Yes.
so many names, I'd go through and thank you all personally. But I really do appreciate everybody's balanced view on this, which essentially was just play the interview and let us decide. And that's exactly what we're going to do. But I think I just wanted to address a couple of things that I know that Karen has said in the past. She was interviewed by my friend Daniel at Future Money Trends. She brought up the second species on the planet, like a second species of human being. I don't get into that with her here, but I do address it. And I invite her back on for another interview to address just that topic because that's such a big, crazy topic. So I know that's one of the things that people think make her a disinfo agent. The other thing is all the extra hidden gold that she claims that the World Bank has access to, with which they're going to sort of remonetize a debt-free currency for the United States and I guess potentially for the world. And I think our friend Mark S. Mann summed everything up pretty well. I just want to read this to you real briefly, guys, and then we'll move on and I'll play the interview. Mark writes, I don't have an opinion on Hudes either way. I think sometimes when I listen to her, she has some interesting things to say, other times not so much. The one thing that I wish you would point out in your caveat addition to the interview is that in the last several years, there have been a few different sources that point to vast, large sums of hidden wealth and gold that were recovered during and shortly after World War II. Number one, there's speculation that Hitler did find King Solomon's treasure. We know for sure he was looking for it. Number two, there have been several people, including Catherine Austin Fitts, who I hold in very high regard, that have talked about the information that Seagrave and Peggy Sterling talk about outlining gold warriors. Bob Chapman always said they were the real deal. Joseph P. Farrell also agrees with Fitts that there must have been a very large hidden sum of off the official books wealth that the U.S. shadow government used to fund a lot of projects during and after the Cold War, including the secret space program. Number three, an undocumented old stash of off-the-books gold would certainly explain how and where all the gold has come from to suppress the price, and would also explain why the Swiss refiners are saying all the gold they are getting for recast is old and dusty. The question you need to ask yourself is, what is pure, unadulterated truth? And how do you measure that from someone who claims to be a whistleblower? As Richard C. Hoagland would say, the lie is different at every level, end quote.
Well, let me jump in here real quick because Jim Willie has often suggested that the Vatican has hoards of gold as well. So, who in our audience doesn't hold Jim Willie in high regard? And he's not been unashamed of making these claims.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people cast aspersions at Willie too, and people cast aspersions at Eric Sprott, and people cast aspersions at all sorts of folks in the sphere. But Jim Willie's great, and nobody gets more views and listeners than Jim Willie. When there's a Jim Willie interview, it doesn't matter who interviewed him, people want to listen. And there is a lot of truth in what a variety of different people are saying. Now, guys, as you listen to this interview, I don't know if anything Karen says is true. But we know that everything coming out of our own government and the powers that be are lies. So let's hear what Karen has to say in her own words. Take it for what it's worth. I hope you guys are able to take something from this interview, and we more than welcome your comments at SGT Report. And please share with us whether or not you think we should have her on again to talk about this second species. We really appreciate it. I hope you enjoy the interview. Hey friends, I am very excited to have on the line a whistleblower. It's Karen Hudes. Karen is the former senior counselor at the World Bank, where she worked from 1986 to 2007, and she's kind enough to join us here at midnight her time in Tokyo. Karen, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Well, it's a real thrill to have you, and just so everybody understands, you blew the whistle on corruption at the World Bank, where you found out that there was a group within who thought they were above the law, and you later realized that this group was really part of a much larger conspiracy to cook the books. I want to ask you about that, and I want to ask you about bond fraud around the world as it pertains to your experience at the World Bank, the IMF, the U.S. government issuing bonds hand over fist, the mysterious Belgium buyer of bonds. Can you just give us your thoughts on where we stand right now in terms of bond fraud?
Yeah, I'm happy to. What I've discovered is that the legal profession and the accounting profession have been, they've fallen down on the job, and I've called them on the carpet. And because of the very helpful power transition model that came to the World Bank, a political scientist named Jacek Kugler, who was the chair of Claremont University, worked on a project for the Department of Defense using the game modeling tools and his knowledge of political science to come up with a very accurate model which predicts how coalitions will form in the future. And it's 90 to 95% accurate. And I modeled rule of law at the World Bank in 2004. And what I didn't know at the time was that he had modeled the power transition between East and West. And the World Bank is a microcosm of the world. It was set up in 1944 at the end of World War II. And I later found out, as I was just hanging on with that power transition model, because I knew that coalitions would form and that we would ultimately have rule of law. And that's exactly where we are right now. That coalition, which is 90 to 95% accurate, is predicting that the corruption that I've been reporting is now going to be over, that a coalition, a sufficient coalition has formed. And I've found out what that corruption is very precisely because there's a group of mathematicians at the Federal Institute of Technology that in 2011 put out an article that identified what they called a network of global corporate control. Those too big to fail, they are really just one bank. And what they have done is they have taken the same directors and put them on interlocking boards. So and they thought nobody would catch them at it. So what you have is you have one mega conglomerate, or I think the legal term is cartel, which has bought up 40% of the assets of the 43,000 companies that are traded on the capital markets, and they pull down 60% of the annual earnings of that group. And this group has, there's a concept called state capture, which is when there's a very powerful group like this banking cartel. They corrupt the government, and so the government, rather than serving the people, it serves that mega conglomerate. And so I've been meticulously documenting how that group moves through space. And so they are no longer a secret network, but they've come out in the open. And once they come out in the open, they're not viable. The other condition that they needed was they needed the support of the U.S. military. And that has dried up as well because they have done certain things, one of which they were going to drop a nuclear bomb on Charleston. They were going to do this on the 7th of October. The nuclear bomb was detonated, I think it was 600 miles off of the coast of Charleston. And there was a seismograph record. And then one of the people on Facebook came to me and said he was 3 miles away from the base, and he saw the landing of the convoy of the nuclear material that went missing from Texas. Wasn't properly documented. And so it was Michael Carey and Tim Giardina, who were then fired by the Department of Defense because they refused to follow orders and detonate a bomb on Charleston. And we know about this not only from the seismograph records, but also because Russia intercepted the military cables. So the military is not on board with a banking cartel that is trying to nuke citizens of the United States.
Okay, yeah.
So that's what's happening.
Yes, and to lend some perspective to that, of course, it was Senator Lindsey Graham had been actually fear-mongering in the days surrounding the event that you referred to, talking about an attack in that very spot, a nuclear attack. And, when we talk about false flag terrorism and how governments use them against the people, we could talk specifically about 9/11, which Jim Willey just said something very interesting in an interview with Rick Wiles just this weekend, and I posted it, and he said this, Karen, quote, "Neocon is just a nice word for neo-Nazi, so people need to wake up that when Bush Jr. hit the office of the White House and his gang of neocons came in with a lot of foreign passports," note, Karen, Israeli passports, "these were the Nazis. These were the neo-Nazis who brought us 9/11. I fully believe they are key players behind the 9/11 attacks," end quote. I want to play you something else from Jim Willey coming up, but let's flush that concept out about the banking cartel and how they have tried to divide and conquer us. Repeatedly, what happens when you bring these issues up as it relates to the banking cartel, the anti-Semite card gets played. And you emailed me the following. I want to read this for folks. Quote, "I have a lot to say about how the same folks who brought us the banking cartel have also tried to divide and conquer us with religion. I deal very comprehensively with the people who think I condone Rothschild. I do not. Neither Catholics nor Jews deserve to be blamed for the crooks who profess to be Catholics and Jews, but are simply crooks," end quote. I thought that was just terrific, Karen, because I feel exactly the same way. I have lots of friends who are Jews, and none of them are in on this grand conspiracy. None of them are the guys that were in control on the day that 9/11 went down, okay? So we had Rumsfeld at the Pentagon, we had Paul Wolfowitz and the Wolfowitz Doctrine, we had Cheney, who's a Zionist, in control of PIAC, Dov Zakheim, the comptroller at the Pentagon, under his watch. $1.2 trillion was reported missing the day before 9/11 by Don Rumsfeld. But anyway, I wanted...
Not only that, but the people that were auditing that were the ones that were killed by that missile that landed. Right. And there's a lot of discussion about technically, was that a drone or was that a plane that crashed into the Pentagon?
That's
right.
That
we've been, and the United States citizens have just been given a pack of lies. But when we're talking about pack of lies, let me just talk about a very big cover-up that is now also completely exposed. And that is whether the Constitution of the United States is in effect and what exactly happened to the Constitution. I had a debate in the American Bar Association Journal on that because on 1871, our Constitution was thrown out the door secretly, and a secret constitution was enacted by a corporation that called itself the United States. And the President of the United States was the chief executive, and Congress has not really been in session. It's been there, but it's under a declaration of emergency, which in 1933, when the United States was declared bankrupt, for all practical purposes, the U.S. Congress is just an appendage
Ceremonial.
because of this secret constitution and the fact that we're declared in emergency secretly
Yeah.
without the Congress bothering to tell the citizens.
Well, and I want to back you up with something
happened.
that's just even a little bit more current, to the extent that on 9/11, with Rumsfeld in control at the Pentagon and Cheney in control at the PIAC in the White House, these are the two men that rolled out the secret classified COG plan, the continuity of government plan, under Ronald Reagan. They created it, and they rolled it out on 9/11. So we can talk about the one supranational corporation which really owns and controls the planet, otherwise known as the banking cartel and its related corporations. And when we talk about that, we need to talk about these men that serve that entity. None of my friends were in control with what went down that day. I think that those guys are more aligned with this banking cartel in this supranational corporatocracy of which you speak than they are with any one religion. Your thoughts?
Yes, but we have to be very clear that religion does have a lot to do with this because the system of finance is one way to control people, and another way to control people is through misusing their religion and their religious affiliation. So this we're going to have to learn how to um, how to see clearly what's going on and not be susceptible. We have to just see very clearly that people who are professing that they're religious but they're doing the opposite are doing the opposite, and it's very sensitive because we have been trained um, to think that anybody who's critical of one particular group's actions is anti Semitic. And that's absolutely not the case with me. I'm Jewish. And as a matter of fact, some people say that I'm being too soft on some of the horrible things that have happened, such as the responsibility for September 11th, 2001. People have got to understand exactly what happened, and also that there was a lot of gold underneath the Twin Towers
That's right.
that was stolen.
That's absolutely
This
right.
was. I had a very strange day on September 11th because I was at the World Bank, and one of the things that you mentioned in your kind introduction is that I was fired in 2007. This is true, but I was also reinstated. I am the Acting General Counsel, and what I just did today, in the very early part of my day, was I sent an email to the dean of the executive directors. That's 25 ambassadors who represent all 188 members. They're a resident board. So I sent an email to the dean of the board and also to the chair of the development committee. That's 25 ministers of finance. The World Bank has a double tier, and the International Monetary Fund have a double tier representation of the countries. They've got the resident board, and 8 of the members are just representing the largest economies in the world, and the rest of them are representing what they call constituencies or groups of countries. So the United States, Russia, Germany, France, Saudi Arabia, China, Japan, the United Kingdom, those countries each have their own dedicated executive director, and the rest of the countries are then grouped. So, but then you've got twice a year the ministers of finance and sometimes ministers of development all come together and have meetings. And during the year, 25 of those ministers of finance are on something called the development committee, which represent those country interests. So I copied those two senior chairs of both the board of governors and the board of executive directors, and I told them that they had better approve a withdrawal request that I sent them because I was going to be spending money negotiating a monetary agreement which is going to replace the that banking cartel prints dollars or whatever currency there is, and they get to keep the difference between the cost of printing the dollars and the value of the currency and charge us interest on it. That is the biggest scam I've ever heard of. And any president of the United States that tried to end that scam by simply having the Treasury Department print the dollars was murdered. Or in the case of Reagan, what they did was they shot him and refused to take him to the hospital until he promised that he wouldn't issue the Treasury dollars that he'd actually already printed.
Well,
so that is ending. That's ending.
Well, by the way, and I want to piggyback on that, then they put the former director of the CIA pretty much in charge at the White House at that point. I mean, you wound Reagan and scare the pants off him, and then Bush Sr. takes charge, only then to implement the Bush dynasty, which we've been suffering under ever since, the Bush-Clinton-Bush dynasty.
Right.
But anyway,
we're not going to suffer under that anymore. And what's going to happen is have you seen, by the way, what the Parliament in the United Kingdom is about to do? They're about to impeach what's his name, the guy that brought them the Iraq War.
Tony Blair.
Yeah. They've got a motion there to impeach him. You can impeach in the United Kingdom a past. That's what they call it, a past politician who is proven to have done criminal wrong. So all of these crooks that have been representing their own interests and the interests of that banking cartel are on notice that people are getting, they're not taking that anymore. This banking cartel that thought it was going to be immune is not immune anymore. It's about to be declared bankrupt. Its paper currencies are about to be replaced by the gold that is in something called the Global Debt Facility, which is the world's gold that was put aside by Ferdinand Marcos for 50 years. So he was a lawyer, and he knew that after 50 years, you own that property clear. There's something called a statute of limitations. If you claim that you own something and you haven't managed to get control of it over it for 50 years, you don't own it anymore. And so that gold is now clean and free for humanity to use. And that's the gold that's going to be used to mint the currencies of all the countries in the world.
Well, I want to circle back because we have literally so much to talk about here. We could go on for 2 hours, and I'm not going to do that to you. But I do want to address a couple of things. One of which is for those who are listening, who listened to, again, my friend Daniel's interview with you, from Daniel from Future Money Trends. He's a buddy of mine. For anyone who listened to that interview that he did with you, where you mentioned a second species which inhabits this planet, you and I have agreed to talk about that in full and in detail in our next interview. And I just want to let people know that you have a special guest that will be coming on with you at that time to flush out some of those details. We're not going to get bogged down in that content here now because we have so many other pressing issues to talk about. And I want to circle back to 9/11. You mentioned the gold in the basements that, of course, went and disappeared. There was also a tremendous amount, hundreds of billions of dollars in bonds that were supposed to come due the next day on September 12th. And if everyone recalls, all of the employees at Cantor Fitzgerald perished on 9/11, and Cantor Fitzgerald was a central bond trading company working that day. And so there was so much to 9/11 that it just defies belief. But I want to play this for you. I want to go back to the Jim Willey interview with Rick Wiles, and I want to play this for you as it pertains to where we currently sit, because you're sharing good news with us, Karen, to the degree that this banking cartel is going to be defeated. I want to believe that. But what they've done in the meantime, though, is they've sold this country out to the Chinese. They've sold everything out from underneath the American people. And it's scary as one evaluates all of these things for those of us who are informed, because we realize that the dollar is going to collapse. The dollar is on its last leg. And we can talk about what you see rolling out that could potentially save the American people. I just wonder if anything can save the American people, and I want to play this clip. This is Rick Wiles asking Jim Willey a question, and I want you to hear Jim Willey's response.
If you put the sale of the J.P. Morgan headquarters together with the Chinese flags reportedly flying at the Federal Reserve branch on Dallas Street, on Pearl Street in Dallas, It sounds to me that we may be looking at a Chinese foreclosure of the U.S. Federal Reserve.
And the entire U.S. economy, yes. They now own the future income from the Federal Reserve and the income taxes from the IRS. They own the IRS income stream. I believe it's been transferred from the Vatican to China in the last year.
Now, Karen, I just wanted your take on that, because when we do interviews with people and we point fingers at the banking cartel, the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, inevitably we get people in the comment section who will say it's all at the Vatican. All the power resides from the Vatican and trickles down. What is your take on what Jim Willey said right there about all of this power and financial power being transferred from the Vatican to the Chinese? We do see evidence of it. What is your take?
My take is to go back to that power transition model that I was telling you about. That is what would have happened if we hadn't had that power transition model. But the fact is that it's 90 to 95% likely that what happens is the banking cartel goes down, and it's not the dollar that's going down, it's the Federal Reserve note. That's the banking cartel. And it's true, with what they did with the quantitative easing, they put us into debt. And then they said that the debt was held by the Chinese. But that's only true if you know nothing about the global debt facility. The global debt facility is this trust agreement that was created by Ferdinand Marcos. He did this as the lawyer for a family that was started in the Philippines by Prince Tolano, who was the twin of Queen Victoria. And he had a son, Jose Rizal, who went to the Vatican for many years. He was supposed to be a pope, but and he was also an ophthalmologist that operated on the eyes of a number of royalty. What Jose Rizal did was he came back to the Philippines with all of the Vatican's gold, and that gold was then increased by the gold that there was a General Yamashita who gathered up gold from the royals, issuing bonds denominated in dollars, denominated in gold. And those bonds have 4% interest on them. That was in 1934. That interest is compounded. So when you add all of that up, the Federal Reserve owes us more than we owe them. So if you know about these bonds, then you realize that no, it's not the Chinese, it's us that are taking over because of the bonds. Yeah?
Well, you know what? We have seen con men stopped entering the Vatican Bank with some 3 trillion euros in fake bonds, or what we're told are counterfeit bonds. We continue to see this. There's another one in Bloomberg, a record 6 trillion of fake U.S. bonds seized. Another one from Zero Hedge, 4 trillion in fake Euro bonds seized.
Yeah, they may be fake bonds,
or
but
maybe
there are
not.
also real bonds. There are real bonds that are they dwarf the amounts that the Fed is owed under the U.S. debt.
Sure.
Okay?
My point is, as we see those news items, is to support what you're saying, because of course the mainstream media would spin it as those are fake or counterfeit bonds because they're serving the masters, right? They're serving the banking cartel. The banking cartel would argue that those are fake or counterfeit bonds. They couldn't possibly be real, but as you mentioned, was it Yamashita's gold? There's much more at play. There's a hidden history. There's a history to this world that's been completely hidden from the people. And I think that when you talk about trillions of dollars in bonds, the reality may be that is the reality. Again, who would be crazy enough to counterfeit $6 trillion in bonds? Why would somebody...
Especially when you know that the bonds are they're trying to buy up the bonds at a discount. And if they were fake, then they wouldn't pay anything for them. No, I can show you the offers that they're scrambling to try to extinguish some of this debt because they are insolvent. And I have asked all of the countries of the world to declare this banking cartel bankrupt. And in the United States, we'll administer it under Chapter 11, which is to say that the bank is going to go on. We're not going to have unemployment of all the people in the banking system, but it's not going to be controlled by the banking cartel anymore. That banking cartel is going to be history in very short order.
Wow. Well, that's powerful. And again, I want to go full circle. I just want to circle back to 9/11. Max Kaiser has talked at length about the tremendous bond fraud and the bonds that were due on September 12th, and all of the people who died at Cantor Fitzgerald who would have had that information, been privy to that information, that would have been involved in the coming due of those bonds the very next day. Everyone died. So we know that the bond fraud is absolutely epic. We know that this banking cartel can be brought down if this bond fraud is exposed, and I think it is all being exposed. Germany can't get its gold back. The whole
Neither can
system.
Austria now. Neither can Austria. There's a whole list of countries that are trying to repatriate their gold. That's right. And so what I'll tell you what I was just about to put up on Twitter, and I'll do that at the end of the show, and I'll give a link to your people, because Elaine Colville, who worked at the International Finance Corporation, which is one of the affiliates of the World Bank, and I have been reporting the corruption that we're talking about to the UK Parliament. Our last statement was put up just about a year ago, and when that happened, this power transition model started predicting that there was going to be rule of law, and that model is 90 to 95% accurate. It has just been going along like clockwork. So as enough people, not everybody, but enough people learn about what all is the real story, this just helps the coalitions to form. And so in the UK Parliament, the parliamentarians are now responding, whereas they didn't respond before. And the email that I got this morning was from a UK citizen who wrote to his parliamentarian, who then wrote to the Right Honorable Exchequer of the Comptroller. And that fellow, I forgot his name, but I'll give you his letter. He tried to equivocate. He said, Karen was talking about gold in Hawaii. She needs to talk to the U.S. authorities about this. So I then asked Wolfgang to give them the exact information on the deposits in the UK banks so the Exchequer could respond to the constituents' question. And that is going to be going right up on, I put this on Facebook and Twitter, and a UK businessman retweets it for 320,000 people in the United Kingdom. So they're going to have to answer their citizens about why it is that they will not accept the gold that's in the global debt facility to replace the currency where they have to pay interest. And they have no answer for that. And in terms of the United States, I've been asking that question to General Martin Dempsey at his town hall meetings, and he hasn't bothered to answer those questions. And one of the other questions I've now been asking is to John Reimer, who's the Inspector General. And when two military heroes, it was Tim Giardina and Michael Carey, who prevented a nuclear bomb from being detonated, and then they were fired for poker chips. I said, that is not the way the personnel policies work.
That's right.
In the Department of Defense, and these heroes are to be reinstated immediately, and when John Reimer didn't do that. So we've been exposing the Knights of Malta in the Department of Defense, and those people are not up to getting a unilateral surrender of the United States. They're not up to having all of the citizens sit back and gently watch the Federal Reserve note crash. We are going to replace those Federal Reserve notes with these golden U.S. dollars. And the country's going to do just great. Russia and Japan are going to be our allies along with Europe. Germany is no longer going to end up looking closer to Russia than to the United States. Right. We're all going to be working together as the allies that we really are, that are just being divided by the banking cartel. It's the banking cartel that's going down, not the United States.
Well, I think you're absolutely right, Karen, because Germany and Russia, if you take a look at what's going on in the world, the turmoil, the saber rattling, the implementation of false flags, the backing of Syrian rebels to topple Assad, the backing of Al-Qaeda to topple Gaddafi. When we talk about what's really going on planet Earth, it is this banking cartel controlling the military-industrial complex that is really causing all measure of horror and war and endless nightmares. And if we could get rid of this thing, if we could get rid of the banking cartel and the noose around our neck, there is a chance that this world could be at peace, could return to really essentially an Eden. I think there's enough resources for everybody on this planet if we could just get rid of the vampires who want it all for themselves.
And the chances that we do exactly that are 90 to 95%. Because although not that many people know about me, the critically important ones do. So who are the critically important ones? I've been in touch with all of the governors. I've been in touch with the attorneys general. I've been in touch with the county executives. I've been in touch with the state legislatures. And when our Constitution was written, we had something called Article 5, because our founding fathers knew very well about this banking cartel at that time. That was the one that was the Dutch East India Company and later the Spanish conquistadors. They've all been that group. We have been under that group's thumb for as long as we've had a history. That group hasn't wanted to claim its role, but we're going to be rewriting history, because what has happened is the coalition has formed. One of the pieces of news that the United States citizens don't know is that just this past weekend in Bolivia, there was a meeting of a group that calls itself the Group of 77, but it's actually over 130 countries that are now bound and determined not to accept the Federal Reserve note. And the banking cartel didn't think that was newsworthy for American citizens to know. Right. So nobody knows about it, except it did happen. And this is actually part of this coalition. There's something called the BRICS countries,
That's
Brazil,
right.
Russia, India, China, and South Africa,
that are also,
that are also no longer accepting Federal Reserve notes. Well, the thing is, behind the scenes, we have had this coalition, and they know. I've been on Russia television today 3 times. I've been, there's a website in Germany for German businesses that has 1.5 million readers per month. I've had an article there, and one of the questions that I asked them at the end of the article that was going up, I said, is there something that you think I should address that I haven't dealt with? They said, yes. Why don't you, Karen, mention the fact that a military helicopter of Germany buzzed the U.S. consulate in Frankfurt again in October? And I did, and I went to see what it was that the Germans said they were doing when they buzzed the U.S. consulate. They were trying to get the citizens' attention. Well, so what we have is we have people who know that the news is not what they watch on TV. And the actual situation, it's very easy to understand if you look back at The Wizard of Oz. Because Frank Baum, when he wrote The Wizard of Oz, this was in 1910, it was just before the banking cartel came in with the Federal Reserve. And
Dorothy wore silver shoes.
That's right.
As she followed the yellow brick road.
That's right. And what's happened with Toto pulling the curtain back, there's a group of whistleblowers, the World Bank whistleblowers, and so we're the functional Toto. So we have pulled the curtain back, and now the whole world is looking, as Dorothy was looking, to see the banking cartel that's really in the secret global control, and asking for everybody to look at the projection screen, which is the mainstream media. They're
right.
not looking at the projection screen. They're looking at the wizard. That's right. Where we are as we speak. That's the moment. We're in the Toto pulling back the curtain moment.
I 100% agree, and I use that metaphor consistently. The men behind the curtain have been revealed for anyone that's awake, and there are a lot more sheeple in the United States of America than people who are awake. But all over the world, governments and people are waking up, and precious metals are important to a lot of people in a lot of different cultures. They may not be important to people in this culture in America, which has been dumbed down and removed from its monetary history when silver and gold were money. But the point is that the men behind the curtain have been revealed. China and Russia specifically are de-dollarizing. They're making agreements between each other. The BRICS central bank will be coming online soon. All of the dominoes are lining up. And I guess we should probably summarize and end with this. You wrote to me that we are now replacing paper Federal Reserve notes with gold coins, leaf, and aurum, as JFK, Ronald Reagan, and Abraham Lincoln were all trying to do before they were shot. I just want to ask you, Karen, in summary, For those of us who are awake and do have precious metals to protect ourselves during a crash, what will this new paradigm look like? We know from the Barclays trader, we know from the work of GATA, we know that these criminal banks suppress the price of precious metals on purpose with millions and millions and millions of paper ounces, sometimes on a daily basis. So what do you think is the true value of a physical ounce of silver or gold based on today's paper prices?
I'll tell you what I put in the monetary agreement that is getting mailed on Monday. But I've already sent an advance copy of the monetary agreement to the UN missions, to the country missions in New York to the UN, and that's $2,500. I'm pricing it that way, and of course, I'm expecting the countries to get back to me and tell me whether they agree with that or not.
$2,500 for 1 ounce of gold.
That's right.
Let me ask you this: if historically the ratio of silver to gold out of planet Earth was 15 to 1, and mining ratios more recently have been much closer to 9 or 10 to 1, that would put us at $250 an ounce silver if silver was unmanipulated and returned to its true value. What do you see for silver? Is silver going to be used in any sort of monetary capacity moving forward? Is it a store of wealth for people?
I think it certainly is, but let me tell you what else is in that monetary agreement. We're talking about local currencies. We're talking about the legal tender laws being erased. Those are laws that tell citizens what they're allowed to use as currency. We're just going to leave that to the market. And then what's going to happen, and many of the local jurisdictions have this, the local people just trade using their local currency, and that generates a lot of employment. And this is going to happen all across the globe. There's an economist called Silvio Giselle who talked about a good way to set that kind of a system up. We're going to have a very nice future, and the chances that that's what happens is 90 to 95%. So I hear in your voice that if only the banking cartel would be ended. It's not if only; they are ended.
Well, there's certainly no brighter way to end this interview than on that good note. Let me, for those among us for those of the listeners who are cynical, and there are many, because so many people have been burned time and time and time again listening to the prognostications of many who've been wrong. I mean, I'd throw Eric Sprott, Jim Sinclair, I'd throw really great people on that list, people that have made prognostications and predictions that have not yet come true, because this banking cartel seems to have much stronger legs than we would suspect. We believe this system would have collapsed far before now. Jim Willie is saying that the Treasury note or the Republic dollar is what they're going to be rolling out when the dollar collapses. It'll be the new dollar for domestic use in this nation, and it will be the basis for a 30% immediate devaluation, he says. A 30% immediate devaluation and a 50% increase in foreign import costs. That spells an absolute disaster for the people of this country.
There are many people that I have spoken to personally, and this power transition model is 90 to 95% accurate. We are not going to have U.S. domestic dollars and foreign dollars. We are going to have gold dollars issued by the Treasury with no interest payable to the Federal Reserve that then goes to the City of London and then gets transmitted to the Vatican. That's not happening anymore.
Well, that was very emphatic, and I can't think of a better way to end the interview. Our guest has been Karen Hudes, whistleblower from the World Bank, and my understanding is she's back at the World Bank as General Counsel?
Yes, Acting General Counsel. Because what I've said to the countries of the world is the minute I start doing my own thing and not doing exactly what you want me to, just throw me out.
Well, Karen, we can't thank you enough for your time. Do you want to direct people to your website or any...
Sure. It's www.kahudes.net. And just Google me. I'm out there now.
Yes, you're easy to find, and we will have you back on. Do you want to give people just a little sneak peek at our next discussion when we talk about a second species which inhabits this planet? Do you want to tell people a little bit about?
Just look at the statue of Akhenaten and Nefertiti, and then while you're at it, read a book written by two rabbis, Saba, Sabbah, who were talking about the fact that the exodus was actually the Egyptian people.
Okay, and we will have a very special guest on with you to help flush some of that out. So if anybody would like to join us for that one, it's sure to be a spine tingler. Our guest has been Karen Hudes, and Karen, thank you so much for staying up late to join us tonight from Tokyo.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a very wonderful interview.
Thank you, and I want to thank each and every one of you for tuning in and sharing this with others. Together, and only together, we can take this world back from those who would prefer to put us in chains. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for checking us out at sgtreport.com. Have a great week.